Good afternoon and welcome. My name is John Kagia and I'm the Chief Knowledge Officer with New Frontier Data. And we're absolutely delighted to have you here today for a conversation we're going to be having on the extraction and productization of cannabis infused products and the opportunity for this new category of products at this really dynamic, exciting, and critical time for the cannabis industry. Given that we are expecting a very large group to join us today, we're going to give a couple of minutes, about a minute or so, to allow folks to come in, get comfortable, and get oriented. But perhaps as we wait for folks to come in, a couple of quick housekeeping items. First, this webinar is being recorded and all attendees will receive a copy of the webinar and the webinar recording and the deck that we have presented after the session. So feel free to listen intently. You'll have access to all of the materials after the fact. Second, we're not going to be taking audio questions because it tends to be a little bit disruptive, but in your attendee interface, you'll see a Q&A button. If you punch that, you'll be able to type in your question and we'll be reviewing them as they come in real time. Some will take during our conversation with our two esteemed panelists. Others will reserve for the Q&A session, but please start sending your questions now. We really want to make sure that we try to address as many of your questions and topics of interest as possible in the time that we have. So with that said, part of the reason why I'm particularly excited to have this conversation around the market for infused cannabis products is the context of my perspective. I've been quarantining in Africa for the past 14 months. And so I left at the beginning of March and visited my last cannabis dispensary during a work trip in late January. And so, had spent a lot of time in dispensaries, talking to dispensary owners, really understanding how the retail environment had been evolving. And then I was gone for a year. And it wasn't until last week that I ended up back in California, where I had the opportunity to visit about more than a dozen dispensaries. And to see the sea change in the placement of these value-added products relative to flower. If in dispensaries in the past, flower really dominated the shelf space, it's amazing to see how much more space edibles, topicals, and other value-added products are taking up in the space. And two, to see how dramatically improved the quality of the packaging, the marketing, the branding, how much that has changed just in a year. And I think this is a perfect reflection of the dramatic changes we have seen at a time that we've seen record market expansion in Q4 and Q1 of 2021, as you've seen New York, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey all promulgate adult use legalization. As we've seen just yesterday, companies like Amazon coming out forthrightly in support for national legalization and saying they're going to change the workplace drug testing policies. Companies like Uber saying that they're exploring opportunities to potentially get into cannabis retail delivery. There's a momentous sea change that is happening, and an anchoring issue and anchoring development within this really dynamic market has been the emergence and evolution of the infused product sector. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. What's happening in this space and why this opportunity is so compelling. Because our partner in this conversation is Valens, I'm not going to read the required statements, but for those of you who've attended investor sessions, you understand that all of this does not constitute investment advice. A quick overview of our agenda. We'll meet our esteemed speakers, and I'm really, really excited for you to hear the voices of our two experts today. We'll introduce you to Valens, who are playing a really important role in shaping the infused product landscape in Canada. And then we'll talk about this marketplace. A 101 introduction to cannabis extraction and productization, and what particularly the consumer packaged good market, should be thinking about, should be aware of as companies start to explore opportunities in this market. We'll leave plenty of time for discussion and Q&A, but please start getting your questions in early. This conversation will run a full 90 minutes, but like I said, if you need to drop off early, a recording will be sent to you after the session. So without further ado, let's begin. I'll begin the introductions by saying my name is John Kagia. I'm the Chief Knowledge Officer here at New Frontier Data. And in that capacity, I have the pleasure and the privilege of leading the team that produces and publishes the work that New Frontier has been delivering on the cannabis industry specifically over the past 6.5 years. And so in my role as moderator today, I've literally been drawing on everything that we have learned over the past few years to try and kind of guide our conversation with the team from Valens. And, as we have talked about some of the monumental changes we have seen in cannabis over the past decade, few to me have been as striking, as compelling, and as exciting as the change that we are seeing in the infused product category. First, and principally because these are things consumers have never had before. They're getting to experience these products for the very first time, and we're watching this evolution happen in real time. It's really, really exciting. So with that, our first panelist is Steve Johnston, management consultant for the Valens company, who's just been a great collaborator as we've been trying to think through what to discuss in today's conversation. Steve, please introduce yourself.
Great, thanks, John, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm working with the Valens company to really help formulate a consumer packaged goods strategy within Canada and really help them gain market share and continue to build on their great credibility as a trusted extractor and tester of cannabis products within the Canadian marketplace. So it's been great to join them. I did spend just over a year working for a previous licensed producer out in the Maritimes, but I have over 30 years of consumer packaged goods, beverage alcohol, and B2B experience with companies like Nestle's and Molson Coors and Office Max. So getting into the industry for me was enjoyable because of the fact that Canada now is the first G7 country to federally legalize it and to bring experience and passion that I have for the industry, which we'll touch on later on during the call.
Thank you, Steve, and I'm really excited. I mean, 30 years of CPG experience coming into cannabis and doing this in Canada, as you said, the first G7, G20 nation to be legal. I'm really excited to hear your perspective. And our second panelist, Quinn Shiskin, who is product innovator extraordinaire with the Valens company. Quinn, really excited to have you here. Please introduce yourself.
Thanks, John. Really look forward to being here and welcome everybody to the seminar, as I think education is the foundation of this cannabis sector. But here at Valens, my current role is Director of Products and Innovation. And really, I serve as the strategic link between the commercial business teams and our operational teams. So by connecting our business plans with our plant operations, really helping execute on R&D initiatives, but also being the subject matter expert in quality and regulatory environments, but always on the forefront of innovation to always make sure that we're increasing our productivity, increasing our capabilities on extraction and purifications, and always to help manage our capital expenditures against targets and capital revenue targets. But previously, my life was in oil and gas. I came from building some of the world's largest bitumen mining and refinement facilities. So always had a deep passion for cannabis, though, and used a lot of my relatable knowledge and skills to develop my own IP within the cannabis sector, having a great understanding how to derive value from the plant and understanding how extraction systems from CO2 or ethanol and hydrocarbon all make different end products and how to derive those into the most value in consumer packaged goods. So a wealth of knowledge, a deep passion for cannabis and all the therapeutic benefits. Now taking that garage chemistry industry into commercial cannabis has been one of my passions and one of my execution points here at Valens. So lots of great experience in CPG and cannabis knowledge, and look forward to this chat.
I mean, I love that. Oil and gas engineer innovating cannabis infused products. I mean, that is the spirit of this industry if I've ever heard it. Love it. Well, thank you both for being here and really, as you can tell from the conversations we've had preparing for this, really, really excited for this. For our attendees, as we always do, we're about to run an audience poll that is appearing on your screen right now. This one's 4 questions. The first 2 about where you fit within the cannabis ecosystem, and then 2 around which product categories you think are going to experience the greatest growth over the next little period, and what you think the biggest challenges are, or the biggest challenges being in this industry. Please take, let's say, 90 seconds to answer these questions. Yeah, responses are anonymous. We're not going to know what you've told us, but it gives us a sense of both who we have in the room and how you're thinking about this market. Once we're done, we'll take a minute or 2 just to quickly talk about the results with Steve and Quinn, and then get into the heart of our conversation. Thank you to those who have already answered. If you've already done the poll and are waiting for the others to complete it, please take a moment to think about what questions you have for our panelists. Clearly 2 very deep perspectives on CPG. Steve coming in with a lot of experience from other markets in this space. Quinn coming in with a lot of technical expertise in product development. What do you want to know about this space, this moment, and this opportunity? And maybe we'll keep these open for another 30 seconds or so. Thank you to everyone who has answered so far. Results are looking good. Interesting. And with about 10 seconds to go, you should be hearing the Jeopardy music now. Okay. Thank you to everyone who participated in that. I'm sharing the poll results on screen now. And I'd like to just quickly kind of talk through these and get Steve's and Quinn's reactions. So which cannabis market verticals do you currently operate in? So this is surprising. Almost an even split between CBD and THC, with 53% in CBD, 51% in THC. Generally, we've had more participants on the THC side, but great to have the CBD market so well represented here. Mm-hmm. For the 32% who are not currently in the space, come on in, the water is fine. What areas of the industry are you currently involved? 39% in processing, about a quarter in cultivation, 29% in retail. So pretty good representation of the market. Which category do you think are going to experience the greatest growth? Comfortable lead there for edibles at 27%, CBD products at 22%, and then infused beverages at 17%. So 3 categories, I think, Steve, which you and Quinn have a lot of expertise in. I'm looking forward to discussing that. And then final question, what's the biggest business challenge in the cannabis industry? 21% say it's raising capital, but compliance is a big issue for about 1/5, that's 20%, and miscellaneous issues, most other things are at less than 10%. So Steve, sorry, I kind of barreled through those, but I wanted to get your reaction. What do you think?
Yeah, no surprise on the edibles, I think, as far as the category that we expect to see the most growth in, not knowing if these are Canadian or US or international attendees, but I would say absolutely within Canada. It is a huge, and we'll touch on that later on in the presentation. I think if you look at cannabis and the inhaling products, whether it's vapes or dried flower or pre-rolls, it represents a large percentage of the business today. And I don't think more people are going to move towards, if you currently, smoke cannabis, you'll continue. But I think where the bigger opportunity is in the health and wellness and personal care area, specifically around edibles and CBD, bringing new consumers into the industry, which I think part of education and what Valens brings is that grounded research and development and highly quality IP. So it fits nicely with where we're going.
Quinn, any reactions to this?
No, just kind of looking through the challenges in the industry as well. I think it's all very common themes that we see, and a lot of the similar problems. And raising capital is one thing, but getting into the compliance is very complex, and a lot of nuances to kind of navigate through there. So I think this is a nice, well-rounded balance of what we see here in Canada, of all the issues we see, the products that we see emerging, and really the target focused area for new consumers.
And I think notable on the compliance being the second most identified issue here, for the folks who are not in the industry yet, you will hear that compliance is just a perennial issue in this market. It's a really difficult, it can be a really difficult space to navigate. So wherever you're thinking about playing in the space, do make sure you've got good counsel helping you navigate the regulatory environment, because it can be both very challenging and can get you into trouble if you're not clear on what you're doing. So with that, thank you to our attendees for participating in that poll. Always really, really interesting to see your responses. And thank you, Steve and Quinn, for the feedback. So let's get into the heart of our discussion here. Steve, I'd love for you to introduce Valens to our attendees who may not know what you do and why your work is so compelling.
Sure, no, absolutely. And Valens started as an extraction company and a kind of a lab testing quality company back in the day, and the largest purchaser of biomass in Canada, and clearly saw the benefits of their expertise, I would say, and hence the reason why Quinn's on this call today is really Valens is a consumer packaged goods cannabis company when it comes down to it, but it's really grounded in all the key components around the extraction processes that we have, the 5 very unique ones, the testing and the credibility that we have as far as ISO certified. And I think the other part is that a lot of the technologies that we use, and we'll touch on those, source being one of them, the emulsion technology, because not everybody likes cannabis, the taste of cannabis, or whether it's through smoking or through eating. So the uniqueness that Valens has around those 3 critical areas position itself very well to partner and work with consumer packaged goods companies to create brands, not just for Canada, but obviously in the US. We have over 84,000 square feet of production capabilities in Canada, both in the West Coast and in Toronto. We acquired a great company called Life Technologies out of Kelowna that manufactures edibles, which has been a great addition. And we just recently announced an acquisition in the US, Green Rose, which is the second largest private CBD company based out of Deerfield, Florida. So we've entered into the US as well. So I think what you're going to see from Valens is everything is personal. It's a bit of who our mantra is, starting from our CEO, Tyler Robson, but it really is grounded in our core capabilities from when we started back in the day around our quality of extraction and our testing. And we really have built within the Canadian marketplace a lot of trust with partners and with provinces. And that is a really a great foundation, in my opinion, to start from. And we've had great success and great conversations with many companies this year around partnering and launching brands. So,
well, thank you for that, and such a timely thing for Valens to be really gaining momentum at the advent of Cannabis 2.0 in Canada, and a really exciting time in that market. So thank you for that context. And I think that's really important. A company that has moved very quickly to build, innovate, and develop capacity at a time that the market around the company has been evolving dramatically. So, before we get into the conversation specifically around what it takes to build a product in this space, since we do have about a third of our attendees here not in this space yet, I think it's important to put some context around why cannabis, why now, why this is such a timely opportunity. So I'm going to quickly run through just some global perspectives on why this industry is moving quickly, and then discuss those with Steve and Quinn. And so first is just looking at the way the global map has changed over the past few years. When we first started looking at this industry and we first started doing this work, there was almost no country on this map that had anything shaded in other than dark blue, where it was fully illegal. And just over the past decade, you've seen this phenomenal transition or acceleration around liberalization of cannabis policy. That does not mean that all of these markets look or are regulated like the Canadian markets. You know, there's a lot of different types of regulatory policies that are being deployed. But the takeaway here is not that all of these markets are ready to go, but rather that there's a global sea change in public attitudes that's happening, and it is pushing our global society toward more liberal cannabis access. It will take markets different amount of time to get to the level of maturity and sophistication of the North American market. But this is happening on a global scale, and it's happening quickly. Second, the global cannabis market today is already massive. By our estimates, consumers currently in largely the illicit market, but including the small component that is currently legal, are spending over $400 billion in cannabis as we speak. And there's nearly 300 million consumers in the world today who consume cannabis regularly. Why this is important is that this is really crude cannabis spending. This is spending on largely flower. So it doesn't account for any of the opportunity presented by value-added products, nor does it account for any of the potential that's going to be created by the industrial applications, the hemp-based applications. So this is a really conservative estimate for what the total opportunity for cannabis could be in the coming years, both as we kind of advance the therapeutic applications, liberalize access for recreational use, and then really begin to build capacity around the plant's industrial applications. And even though it is still illegal in many parts of the world, at over $400 billion, we're talking about cannabis being in the neighborhood of cosmetics and the TV and video market, of the wine market. Like these are huge numbers. And if you consider the amount of investment and the amount of social capital invested in products like wine, it begins to put in context where we think cannabis could be in our global society in the near term, or in the medium term. And then just a quick snapshot and introduction to the size of the US market. In 2020, the legal market was roughly $20 billion, while the illicit market remained at $66 billion. So there's still a huge delta between how much of the total market in the US the legal market has captured. But by 2025, we're looking at a legal market that's closer to $45 billion, and the illicit market shrinking slightly to around $60 billion, accounting for 43% of the market by 2025 will be legal. Huge potential and huge growth, and worth considering that, as you can see from the map, this is the legal opportunity here is just in the states where it's currently legal. All of the states on the map that are hatched, that have the hash that are kind of shaded, are states which could potentially legalize in the next couple of years. So huge market growth still to come, huge market expansion still to come, even as the states where it's legal are growing at phenomenal pace. And then finally, looking at Canada, where Valens is headquartered. With the market opportunity approaching $7 billion by 2025, the Canadian market is leading not only as the first G7 nation, as Steve had said, that has legalized, but as the first national market that is accelerating toward a fully regulated national market. And that's going to create huge opportunities for innovation, as well as serve as an important test model to every other country that's going to try to do this. And even as Canada transitions to a legal status, you're seeing the number of consumers being kind of self-reported consumers in Canada increasing. It's grown from from roughly 5 million in 2017 to 6.3 million in 2020, which means that not only is the market growing because consumers are transitioning from the unregulated market to the legal one, the market is also growing because you have new consumer adoption. Lot in there, a lot of big trends shaping this opportunity. But Steve, I'll turn to you first. This global emergence of legal cannabis, how are you thinking about it, and how is it shaping your thinking of Valens strategy?
I think if you look at globally, I think a lot of the governments across the globe have launched medical first, and I think it's more around just making sure they do it right, which I think is pretty smart. I think, in Canada, we did that when we launched first medically, but I think what you're seeing in Canada specifically, and there's a bunch of different pieces to this slide here, is that, you know, with more and more illicit moving to legal, a big part of that is you're seeing, you know, the introduction of the 1 ounce bags, and the pricing per gram significantly less than it was 2 years ago, where, you know, a price for a good quality bud was, you know, 2 times the price of what you could find in the illicit market. And there was an abundance amount of inventory in the market. There still is today. Hence the reason people are moving to extracting it and putting in other products. So you'll see the shift from illicit, I think, to legal for more of the, you know, current dried flower products. But I think the real big upside is that if you look at the adult use, a lot of the products that we see at Valens in the adult use as it's segmented here are really around personal care, health, and wellness products as well, right? So trusted licensed producers that have built strong reputations such as Valens have credibility in the market. And you're going to see a lot of licensed producers move forward with trying to capture new consumers and really trying to understand who those consumers are within each of the different categories they compete in, and really making sure that they target those consumers and their needs. And I think that's one of the things that you're starting to see now. Back when, you know, we went through legalization a couple of years ago, everyone was excited about becoming a licensed producer, and they would just produce and sell whatever they could. But the consumer, I think today, is looking for more education, and partners that we speak to are looking for more research and development and grounded in consumer insight. And that, I think, is going to play extremely well if we continue as an industry to do the right things with, you know, the high strict regulations that the federal government puts on those licensed producers to actually set up shop. If we continue to do and abide by the rules and play by the rules, I think the government is going to notice that. And with that, we're going to be able to advertise a little bit more broadly on some of the 2.0 and 3.0 products that we are seeing come to the market to get those new consumers. And look, it's going to take time. I mean, there's still a bit of a stigma around cannabis. This plant has so many applications, but I think what it's known for, but what it can do from a health and wellness perspective is something that I personally believe is going to be the genesis of the Canadian industry specifically moving forward. So.
Interesting. So Quinn, quickly to you, you know, you're an oil and gas man. At least you've come in from the oil and gas industry, which is an industry truly of global consequence. How have you been thinking about and observing just these global trends that ultimately, I guess, drew you into this market?
For sure. As we see it, the world is adopting cannabis. There's a lot of negativity and a stigma around it, like Steve mentioned, but the arc of worldwide cannabis normalization and legalization is, in its deepest sense, is a desire to reduce overall social harms. I think nearly a century of criminalized prohibition purportedly protected societies against the perceived dangers of the psychotropic plant, and at a great expense of restricting the medical research and the mass incarcerations of these nonviolent crimes, and the immense enforcement cost really put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth kind of entering this category. But I think with the international experiments in legalization, like the Canadian market, that's high regards of safety, quality, regulation, I think that helps the optimism that a well-regulated system can balance many of these historic harms, and really ending that negativity around the plant and the proper science with the education, with high regards to regulation and safety, will really allow these countries to adopt safe cannabis regulations and really adopt the beloved plant that we have here in Canada. And I think it's just getting that education, like Steve mentioned, of getting that stigma away, getting understanding of how this plant's going to react with your system in different delivery verticals. Canada has a fantastic model to let these countries kind of look at, use as a seed document to kind of develop their regulation, as we have done it well in Canada. We do deliver safe products, and we've developed a market here that should be replicated around the world.
Profoundly exciting time. Thank you for that. We'll do the same thing here. I'll quickly present kind of an orientation to just some of the big trends we're seeing on the consumer. But I'd love both of you to weigh in here, and we'll talk in a bit more detail. So, for folks who've been in this space, in this industry for a while, this may seem intuitive, but I think it's really important to keep revisiting this idea of both how diverse the reasons are for why consumers use cannabis, and two, how wellness focused so much of that use tends to be. So the first, on the latter point first, the wellness basis for cannabis use. We've done this survey several times over the past few years, and we asked the question almost kind of with very little modification, and almost invariably the results come back the same. Beyond relaxation, which you could maybe argue has a recreational component to it, when you look at the other main reasons why consumers are using cannabis: stress relief, reducing anxiety, helping fall asleep and helping stay asleep, pain management. I mean, these are all really anchored in improving either mental or physical kind of wellness outcomes. And so even as we talk about the bifurcation of the market between medical and recreational, it is important to understand that a lot of consumers who self-describe themselves, or who describe themselves as recreational, are actually wellness-based consumers, though they don't view themselves as quote unquote medical consumers. And so there's a nuance there that product developers need to understand. Second, we are seeing this kind of split in the market between combustion-based products, mainly flower and vapes and concentrates, and ingestibles, mainly edibles. 51% of the market say they use both combustion and non-combustion based products. But you already have about 1/5, 20%, who do not consume any flower at all. They're only in the value-added side of the market. And we actually expect that number to grow as this market matures. So that's the opportunity that Valens and the infused product manufacturers are capitalizing on. And then again, just another point to note: this is a high consumption market. Amongst our consumers, nearly half are consuming at least once a week. So it tells you that it's not only so that there's a lot of kind of integration of cannabis into people's lives and lifestyles, and that's part of the reason why there's so much opportunity for these new product forms. People are already consuming quite heavily and are interested in adapting different products for different use cases. You may have recently seen that we put out our latest cannabis consumer report, which introduced our cannabis consumer archetypes. We have developed or updated our consumer archetyping, this time to include 10 archetypes that reflect where the cannabis consumer is coming into 2021. And I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail here. If you have not already accessed your complimentary copy of this report, I urge you to go to newfrontierdata.com/analyst-report, where you can access this and everything else. But suffice it to say that we've identified 10 distinct groups of consumers who are defined not just based on things like demographics, male or female, age, income, etc., or by their behaviors. Do they smoke flower? Do they not smoke flower? Do they live in a legal market, or do they not? But we've taken a really broad array of dimensions, over 100 different dimensions, to group these 10 consumers into archetypes that are most similar. And these are the 10 that we've come up with. And part of the reason why I call out these 10, without going into much detail about who they are, simply to present the fact that there are 10 very distinct cannabis consumer groups who are distinct in the way they consume, in what they consume, in when they consume, in why they consume, and how they view cannabis and where it fits in their lives. Within those 10 archetypes, we have found that not only are there varied consumption behaviors. So in purple, so this is in descending order in terms of frequency of consumption. The more purple there is, the more frequently consumed. The more blue there is, the less frequently they consume. And as you can see, basically 6 of our archetypes, the 6 of our archetypes are more frequent consuming archetypes, and then 4 are less frequently consuming archetypes. That's the first context that we thought was important to share. But second, these 10 archetypes vary in which products they're consuming. The more gray there is, it means that they use a mix of both. And you can see that the savvy connoisseurs, the contemporary lifestylers, the legacy lifestylers, the three archetypes that consume the most are also the most likely to mix both flower and non-flower. And nobody in those three main archetypes said they do not consume flower. All of them consume at least some flower. But as you get towards some of these less consuming groups, particularly the two strongly medically focused groups, the modern medicinals and the holistic healers, people who are health conscious are more likely to gravitate toward non-combustible products than consumers who are not so medically focused. So all of that is to say, the consumer landscape is very dynamic, and consumers are increasingly at least complementing their flower use with value-added products, and to a lesser extent starting to transition away from combustion completely away to non-combustion based products. So Steve, over to you, and how the evolving consumer in Canada, which is admittedly lagging a little from the US consumer, how you're thinking about the consumer and how the consumer experience has influenced your strategy at Valens.
Yeah, so I think we look at the consumer and really try to understand specifically who we're targeting, whether it's dried flower, to your point, which is a current user trying to move that user from an illicit market into a legal market, educating that new consumer that comes into the marketplace as well, that's interested in trying something different outside of flower. So when you look at the products that Valens produces, which is pretty much anything from dried flower to pre-rolls to 2.0 to 3.0 products, I think at the end of the day, it really focuses on, you know, each of the different provinces that we cover across Canada. And there's different consumers in Quebec as there is out west, as there is in Ontario, and working with our retailers, our retail partners. So we have many great relationships with our regional and national key accounts. And the bud tenders are really our source of who's coming to the stores, what they're buying, what they're looking for. So we really take our temperature on gaining insight from the bud tenders who service the consumers on a day-to-day basis. That coupled with the work that Quinn touches on around our extraction capability. So we meet needs of what consumers are looking for. But the other big thing, which is going to take some time, is actually educating and building products that have rare cannabinoids in them, like, you know, CPG and, you know, different ones that actually more consumers aren't even aware of, to try to educate them around, you know, this product specifically with this rare cannabinoid can solve this specific problem. So diagnosing consumers and then prescribing products is a big part of what Valens does versus just launching products into the marketplace. So it's really a balance of both from our perspective.
I'm glad you mentioned the minor cannabinoids, because we actually have a question here from Alexander Kordaji about the role of these minor cannabinoids. Now, understanding that we have some participants here who may not know what minor cannabinoids are, just a quick primer. If THC and CBD are the two most commonly found cannabinoids, cannabis-based compounds in the cannabis plant, THC being the one that has a psychoactive or intoxicating quality, CBD, which is has a strong therapeutic applications, but generally doesn't get you high, so to speak. The minor cannabinoids are other cannabis-based compounds that occur with much less frequency, but which have been recently discovered and are seen to have a lot of potential therapeutic application. So there's a lot of excitement around these recently discovered compounds, questions around how to produce them at scale, and then, you know, how to optimize their wellness effects. But Steve, posing the question to you, what is the landscape for the minor cannabinoids in Canada right now? And you know, where do they fit within this kind of cannabis 2.0 new product landscape?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think we have to be careful about not getting too excited, we being Valens. Quinn has an unbelievable amount of experience and people at Valens around these rare cannabinoids. I don't think they're readily known. And you know, for us, it's, you know, think big, start small, scale fast. It's more about, let's get excited about what we could be, but let's not, you know, get in our way of launching products that have rare cannabinoids in them where the consumer doesn't understand exactly what that is or what that does. So starting with CBD, I think non-intoxicating cannabinoid, and getting consumers to try those products, whether it's in oils or in an ingestible to start. But you're going to see a lot from Valens around the education and research around these rare cannabinoids, and then look to partner with select CPG companies. We've had lots of conversations with companies that would, let's just say, that are very interested in these rare cannabinoids because it actually fits nicely with what they're currently selling, you know, in traditional drugstores as well. So maybe I'll pass it over to Quinn just to touch a little bit more on those the cannabinoids and his perspective as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, like you said, it's education of these minor cannabinoids and other bioactives within the cannabis plant. THC and CBD are just being adopted and understood of how to consume and what they do to your body and how they kind of interact. In Canada, the regulation for minors are a lot more difficult. Without being able to make a functional label claim, saying that I'm going to take this CBN product for sleep, or it's going to help me go to bed at night. We can't say those functional claims here in Canada. So adopting new cannabinoids into functional products will be more of a challenge when we can't tell them why they're using them, if it's for information or for IBS support or for sleep. We can't describe those currently. So I think with unique marketing initiatives, education seminars and platforms to really get engagements from consumers to build out that sector is going to be the starting challenges. Valens has been working on this for quite some time. We've made products with different minor cannabinoids. We've got great SOPs and IP around how to derive them from the plant, how to purify them, and then how to use them into different gummy platforms or tincture-based programs. But really now it's about getting the consumers to understand them of why I need to consume these other products alongside THC and CBD.
I'm really glad you said that, Quinn. This consumer education piece is going to be so critical. And Steve, I appreciate your word of caution there. Yes, there's certainly opportunity around these minor cannabinoids, but it's also worth understanding that consumer awareness based on our research around these minor cannabinoids relative to how familiar they are with CBD and THC, it's night and day. So for anyone who is looking to actively kind of pursue these minor cannabinoids, recognize that there's going to be a major consumer education gap that will need to be closed. That's on a magnitude of order greater scale than the consumer CBD education gap, which still remains. There's still a lot of education that still needs to happen around CBD, let alone around these minor cannabinoids. So not to suggest that there's not opportunity there, but one that, you know, stakeholders should be clear-eyed about because of that awareness gap. So I want to keep us moving and get to the heart of our conversation around the fragmenting cannabis consumer product landscape. And maybe first, just an orientation to how much has changed in the past few years. So these data are from the US legal markets. We've aggregated over 24 different legal US states into this. So it's a pretty good national picture of overall sales. And it's extraordinary to see that flower is now at 45% of the market and value-added products have taken up the rest. So if you combine flower and pre-rolls, which are essentially the same thing, you have 50% of the market is flower, 50% is value-added products based on cannabis extracts. And you have edibles hold about 10%, which has been pretty consistent, but I think that may be about to change. And just a great illustration, I thought, of how fragmented this market has become is looking at Washington State. State with 7 million residents. It's been legal there since the summer of 2014, or at least the market has been open since the summer of 2014. It took the state 4 years to approve the first 2,000 legal products, infused and value-added products. So between 2014 and 2018, they approved the first 2,000 products. Between 2018 and 2020, they approved another 2,000 products. an indication or illustration of how much things have accelerated over the past couple of years. Second, look at the distribution of these categories. You have 1,700 different SKUs for candies, 625 for chocolates. You have 176 different types of cooking ingredients, oils and sugars and spices and seasonings. This is a lot of different types of products for a small market. And within these broad categories, you have hyperfragmentation happening. So within that 1,758 candies, you have chews and hard candies, mints, jellies, drops, gummies, lozenges. And yes, some of these names are interchangeable, but it is an indication of just how much diversity there is in this landscape. Similarly, looking at the table on the right under baked goods, these aren't the cookies that you were having in college dorms, for those of you who had cookies in college dorms, no judgment. But these aren't those products anymore by a long shot. The amount of food science that has influenced the development of infused products has been phenomenal. And it's not only made for better tasting baked goods and other types of edibles, but it's also made for more effective products. And then we're going to talk quite a bit about beverages, because I think it's a category that is so suited for disruption. I saw a question from one of our panelists asking, are cannabis-infused beverages really going to be an alcohol killer? I'd love to particularly Quinn, to hear your take on that. But from both of you, I mean, Steve, you're from the alcohol space. How worried are they about the ingress of legal cannabis? And so a quick overview of the hyperfragmentation taking place in this market. But I'll pause on this slide, which I think is a great illustration of just the spectrum of products we're starting to see in this space, with different applications, different use cases, and really kind of orienting consumers toward these more daily use, both wellness and lifestyle products. So maybe Quinn, to you around product innovation. I mean, you are the head of innovation and product development. Talk a bit about how this sea change is happening in what products brands are thinking about trying to infuse, and how that's shaping the work that you're doing.
Yeah, no, it's I see the market today as traditional edibles with THC and CBD, infusing those into different products. We found out those make kind of average consumer products. So I really look at what kind of really disrupts this industry, or what's going to really make consumer packaged goods interesting and products that consumers really enjoy and go after. And I think it is really looking at IP development, like the technology Valens has, the source technology by Valens. And it's an emulsion technology to be able to deliver cannabinoids in a taste-free, smell-free environment, but with a complete homogeneity through the products, rapid onset, planned offset, and really understanding of how these cannabinoids are going to act when you consume them through these different verticals. So when you look at using the proper IP with the proper education and the proper price, I think the beverage category is a very interesting segment. So right now there's a bunch of beverages on the market today. I have mixed feelings on a few of them because I don't think they have the proper IP to deliver that product consumers are wanting. You don't want to have a film of product on your teeth. You don't want to have that cannabis taste or flavor in most scenarios. So understanding what a true good IP is to be able to make these products that consumers are going to be going after and long consuming is really where I think the beverage category has lots of expansion and room to grow. The Valens really doubled down on beverages. We're developing a world-class facility just focused on the beverage category in the GTA called the Palmies facility. And there we're going to be using highly integrated filling systems to do 200 bottles an hour, but we more doubled down on the IP that goes within that. That source technology really is going to be a true advantage kind of going to any one of these verticals. If it's health and wellness, or if it's functional products, or if it's beauty, all can be used as IP developments to make sure their product has consistent dosing, complete homogeneity, stability through different kind of environments. If it's heat or chilling, having a product that can withstand those, I think is going to be the very key steps for CPG products to have a successful launch, but also a long validity life cycle within the market today. So IP development, great products is all the foundation to kind of all these verticals you have on the screen there.
So Quinn, just to kind of make it plain, so is it safe to say that broadly speaking, if a brand, a company had an idea for a type of product that was going to be cannabis infused, broadly speaking, you can work with just about any media for infusion. The key is just to figure out what the right tolerances or ratios are?
Yeah, you can use different derivatives. So Valens went after having 5 different extraction methods, so CO2, hydrocarbon, ethanol, solventless. And we did that so we could have all the precursor resin to be able to make different resin derivatives for all these product verticals. I think not all resin's the same. You need to be able to make a product specification and a resin specification that suits the needs for your product. We'll discuss that a little bit further about a life cycle of an infused product, but you can use basic full spectrum resins or broad spectrum resins or isolates. There's all different derivatives that give you different value, but also different consumer experience of organoleptic sensory profiles, to onset times, to taste, if it's the cannabis strain forward flavor or fully removed, so you have no cannabis flavor. The resin diversity is really that start foundation for all these product roadmaps.
Well, and I think that's something important for folks who've never been through this process as well to understand, which is that part of the value of working with a partner who can work with different media is that if you're pivoting in your product strategy, you're not just locked into somebody who only knows how to make beverages, that they can pivot to a different product form, a different type of formulation, but while keeping kind of everything under one roof. I think that's a really kind of important aspect for a market where there's so much opportunity to expand out in terms of what types of products you innovate.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, with the 500 different bioactives within the plant, having a partner that understands how to remove them, to capture them, but also how to infuse them in different verticals. There's a lot of challenges and nuances to product development. It's not just an added ingredient into a gummy. You need to know where to put in the formulations. You got to understand the stability, the thermodynamics through production to make sure that product is stable and sound through the life cycle of its on-shelf experience. So lots of nuances to remove those cannabinoids, secondary compounds, to capture them, to use them as functional ingredients down the road.
Steve, I wanted to capture this while we were kind of on this theme of cannabis as an alcohol killer. I mean, you've come in from the rarefied halls of the alcohol industry. 2 perspectives there. One, what's your take? Do you see cannabis as a viable challenger to the alcohol sector? And then second, how is the alcohol industry kind of reacting to or preparing for this sea change that we're witnessing?
I think the short answer is yes, I do. Molson Coors and Pexo wouldn't have got together to create Trust Beverages unless they saw it as an opportunity and invest what they did. So that tells you something. Constellation Brands and investing in Canopy is another one. So absolutely I do. I think it's really early to tell how much cannabis infused beverages will disrupt in Canada specifically. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Marketing is the big one for me, that the ability to build an alcohol brand starts with the consumer and is usually done at point of purchase, which is in a restaurant, pub, licensee. Cannabis doesn't have that advantage, right? They don't have the advantage to connect with consumers and give them samples and talk to the products like beverage alcohol does today in Canada. Pricing to me is another one. If you're going to be successful, and I believe 2.5 milligrams, 2 to 2.5 of THC is probably the ultimate maximum that you should be putting in a beverage, because no one that drinks a beer drinks a high octane beer. They drink something where they're going to have 3 or 4 of them. So the THC maximum, in my opinion, needs to be about 2.5. And then pricing is another one. I mean, it's very expensive to buy a cannabis infused beverage. So if you're looking to trade from buying a 473 ml Canada Canadian for $2.75 or buying a cannabis infused beverage, which is twice as expensive, you're trying to understand, okay, it's twice as much. Why am I paying more for that? Those that are core consumers in the beverage alcohol may do it because they want to give their liver a break and try something different. But I do look at it, hence the reason why Molson Coors changed their name to beverage company, not beer company. They are looking at getting, and the reason they changed their name into other types of beverages, seltzers and cannabis. So there's a huge shift, I think, happening within beverages in general. I think people are smarter and they're looking for healthier alternatives as well, whether it's specific sugar content, within products. Diabetes is another huge one with that as well. So there's a whole bunch of pieces to the puzzle. And I think Valens has the ability and continues to do a great job. But to Quinn's point, we don't see a lot of we see some good products that are in the marketplace, but none of it really is grounded in the consumer. And that work, in my opinion, needs to continue. And good beverage alcohol companies would never launch a brand into a marketplace and then they know exactly who that consumer is specifically and what the functional benefit is. And probably the last one is more distribution of where I can buy beverages. Beer brands and spirit brands are sold in beer stores and LCBOs. Some of the newer consumers to cannabis don't want to shop in a dispensary. They're not comfortable going to a dispensary because they feel it's maybe a drugstore, because 70% of the product that's purchased is high THC product as well. So that's a big barrier. But the biggest opportunity I see is online. I mean, with what happened last year with COVID, which was game changing globally, it's clear Amazon has done extremely well because of that. And I think a lot of the provincial wholesalers have an opportunity to leverage their online platform and educate not just existing consumers, but new consumers, and put educational materials, obviously allowed by Health Canada, where new consumers can spend the time to educate themselves around, products and attributes and so forth and so on. So will beverages and cannabis be big over time? Absolutely, because I believe the regulations are going to change, and we're going to see products being sold outside of dispensaries, and wouldn't be surprised if you saw them being sold in traditional bars and restaurants down the road as well.
I just want to just do a level set for those who may be new to this market, because you've had heard both Steve and Quinn allude to the challenges of marketing in this space. So the challenges of marketing cannabis products are slightly different in Canada than in the US, but they're very similar in terms of the outcome being the same. It's very difficult to get in front of the audience. In Canada, there's a lot of restrictions around marketing effects or marketing the effects of the product that you're promoting, which really constrains you in how you engage the consumer that is ideally suited for the product you're creating. In the US, the challenges around platforms like Google's and Facebook's and social media giants really prohibiting all forms of cannabis advertising, meaning that the primary way in which most of the rest of society is building brands is the cannabis industry is excluded for. Both of these challenges, to Steve's point, I think are really well addressed if you leverage technology. At a time where over the past year, they say we've gone through a decade, maybe more, worth of technology adoption because of the disruptions of the pandemic. The consumer has never been more primed to be engaged virtually, to be engaged digitally. And the idea of continuing to have the bud tender play a role as intermediary between the brand and the ultimate end consumer. I think brands that are still thinking that way, as having the bud tender be their gatekeeper, I think are potentially missing a phenomenally consequential opportunity to directly engage the consumers at a time the consumers are very receptive to that sort of direct outreach.
Yeah, and just to build off of that, John, I think the other thing is and rightly so, I'm not sure the exact age, but I know there's a certain age where the human brain is fully developed, and hence the reason why we don't, children under the age of 21 or 19, we tell them not to consume cannabis because we want their brains to be fully developed. But there's a huge educational component of, let's turn it on its head and go to the school system, and let's educate those kids that are under the age of 19 to tell them exactly why they shouldn't be doing that. So instead of saying, no, you can't do this, let's make sure that we're educating those kids to help them understand that cannabis until a certain age is not good for you, and give them the reasons why, versus saying don't advertise. Because I think if you tell people don't, they're going to try to go around to try to find out why. And I think being more forthright into helping people understand there's reasons why kids shouldn't be consuming alcohol and cannabis at a certain age. And I know if I tell my boys don't do something, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to go around and do it, because they haven't been grounded with any insight as to rationale as to why, other than you can't do it. So I think that's a bit of Canadian culture. We're a bit passive aggressive up here in Canada, and I think that's just part of kind of who we are and our heritage.
We'll take passive aggressive over aggressive. So no, that's good. That's good. I do want to use a bit more time to talk through the product strategy and how to be successful building this before we spend the balance of our time in questions. And just a reminder to our attendees, one, this is being recorded and you will receive a copy of the recording. So no worries if you need to drop off at the top of the hour. But two, please keep your questions coming. Some of them we've been weaving through our discussion. Some we will get through for the Q&A in the balance of our time. But first, just a quick snapshot overview of the industry life cycle and where we currently are. So, and we think North America is a really good illustration of how markets will evolve over time. Generally, you begin with pre-adult use legalization. So you go from prohibition to limited, highly restricted medical use cannabis. And then you go through an early phase of recreational market activation, where it's largely a flower-based market, and generally combustion-based products tend to be where the markets innovate. And then you transition to Cannabis 2.0, which is where Canada is right now, and where markets like Washington, Colorado, California, and Oregon have been for a little bit, which is where you start to see these value-added products really start to gain momentum, both in innovation and diffusion. And then you start to see not just innovation in terms of what these products look like, greater sophistication, but much, much more dialed in alignment between the consumer, their use case, and the product form. This is what Steve was talking about in terms of deeply integrating the consumer into the development of the product, its branding, its marketing, and its distribution. We're at the very beginnings of that process in Canada. Some brands in the US have gotten there, but still a lot of work to be done. But if we're at the beginning stage of this deep alignment in the consumer, the products, and their use cases, the future, we think, is going to be one where you not only have a cannabis product for every real value application that one can think of, so different product forms for different users and different use cases, but also much, much greater normalization of cannabis use. So much greater diversification of applications and consumers. But this is a slide I wanted to spend a bit of time on. One is just about the scale of opportunity. By our assessment, the combined North American market, so the US and Canada, collectively by 2025 will be valued, the legal market will be valued at about $50 billion. And if the market split remains at about where it currently is, that means we're looking at about 25 billion of that in value-added products, 25 billion of that in flower. And so, Quinn, maybe I'll turn to you to talk a little bit about some of the differences and maybe benefits that you see in working with extracts, working with oils or resins to produce products versus dealing with flower.
Absolutely. So flower seems pretty simple, and the pre-rolls and flower kind of smokable category. You're optimizing your cultivation techniques to make that premium flower for many different aspects. So you're based on your cultivation and growing practices, and that's your end outcome of that product. Being able to manipulate and extract the different kind of strains and different strains out there in the market, we can really derive a bunch of value from that to be used in all different verticals of formulation. So being able to have predicted potencies, very accurate dosing, I think is one of the key things. If I want 2 milligrams or 10 milligrams, I want to ensure that I'm getting that consistent dose so I can have a planned experience when I'm consuming for my recreational vice or my medical experience. You want to know what you're getting and the amount you're getting. So using resin derivatives really allows you to do that, to have planned onset and offset times, but also to look at different formulations, being able to manipulate the extract to remove THC, or to be able to have a full spectrum THC-free product, or to be able to have different terpene values and minor cannabinoids to be able to offer a custom experience. And I think that's where a lot of consumer education and product development is coming, is cannabinoids react with people different. And being able to pick apart the plant and reconstruct it into these different formats using resin derivatives really allows access to these kind of different verticals and consumption methods, and giving the consumer such a diverse menu to look at. But having the control to take out what you want from the plant, to remove constituents that could harm the experience. So with the fats or the waxes and chlorophyll, we can remove those so it's a nice, pleasant and clean experience if it's in a vaporizer or a sublingual tincture. It really allows us to have scalability of products. Flower, you're based off what the plant will grow for you. With resin, I can really dictate what we're going to be planting, scalability of products, mass consumption products. If it's in daily consumption rituals or if it's in vaporizer devices, we can have that scaled solution much easy through kind of resin derivatives.
You know, for cannabis, which is a plant and can be so variable, it's, I think, for consumers, part of the excitement and enthusiasm around these value-added products is that consistency. You know, it took the industry a really long while to be able to get to the point where you could have, you know, Coca-Cola level of consistency between batches, between production cycles. But now that the industry is there, for consumers who have had hugely variable experiences on the flower side of the market, you know, one man or woman's blue dream is certainly not another man or woman's blue dream. And so given how much variability there's been and inconsistency there's been on the flower side, infused products have been a very strong counterpoint because of that uniformity. So Quinn, just kind of pulling on that a little, some of these benefits of the infused product strategy. First, could you just talk a little bit about kind of infusion and some of the technologies around infusion and where that innovation is right now?
So cannabis, when extracted, is an oil. So it's very difficult to work into if you're putting into an aqueous environment or a beverage complex. Oil and water just don't mix. So we looked early on and invested in a very sound technology so we can play in all these different verticals and have a diverse cannabinoid active base to be used in many different products. And we found one called the Source technology. We call it the Source by Valens. And it has such great capabilities to be so diverse with seamless integration into all these different products. So we allow this, we have a water-soluble emulsion technology for product developers to really provide consumers with a better and more consistent cannabinoid experience, and having increased bioavailability, which is the big one when you're looking at these different IP technologies. So that means when you consume an edible-based product, you're going to feel that experience in 5 to 20 minutes. With traditional edibles being an hour to 2 hours, there's just no recreational experience or medical experience that's worth kind of going after with those kind of long onset times. So the Source by Valens and other emulsion technologies kind of remove that cannabis taste and flavor so it doesn't impact the sensory profile of the product that it's within, but also stability is a major issue there. Not all emulsions are the same. Looking at it in a beverage, there's common problems of creaming or sedimentation, where your actually active compound is falling out of that solution and congealing on the side of your container, which are a common problem called scalping. And you see that a lot of in different technologies where your actually active substance is sticking to your side of your containers and you're not being able to consume it. So there's no experience after spending good quality money on a product. So when we have this technology, we look at a lot of different verticals, taste, smell free. And then we look at onset, offset time, but also consistency and shelf stability, and using GRAS, or generally recognized as safe ingredients that are commonly used in beverage and food today, to produce this Source technology. So really, it just gives the diversity to product developers to infuse any different vertical. If it's in cooking or if it's in confectionery manufacturing, it's a really diverse product that allows product developers to use their imaginations and infuse at certain spots, but to make a sound and stable product.
Interesting. So maybe just a quick question related to that. A question from Scott Normander. is the industry ready to accept new types of extraction solutions to feed in, or you said you guys have that Valens has now amassed 5 different types of extraction solutions. Is there a need for more, or do you think that what exists on the market is a pretty good representation of the different types of ways that you can disaggregate cannabis to isolate its constituent parts?
So that's one of my things, is always looking at constant innovation and where Valens could go next to stay ahead of the curve. And I think by having all the different methods that we offer today, we really have a rounded portfolio of products or resin derivatives to offer. I don't think there's going to be more advancements in different technologies, but just how to get there quicker, how to make more purified products, and then lower the cost of goods to produce these active resins and these commodities at the end of the day, ingredients. I think there's going to be advancements in more just delivery methods, so you can have a planned experience, have a really defined onset and offset, so people can know when you consume a beer or glass of wine, you're going to have an experience within 5 to 10 minutes. You need that in all these different product verticals, so you really feel the value of the product that you're consuming and that you're purchasing at the end of the day.
So more innovation on the emulsification side, on the binding side.
The extraction is, we got all the different, because they're food and pharma, we used a lot of different industry knowledge and applicable knowledge to bring it into cannabis to derive value out of that plant. I think it's going to be that secondary minor cannabinoids, which is a lot of science innovation will come, but also just making production metrics work so we can have a lower cost of goods that's really recognized at that MRSP value.
And again, for those who aren't oriented to the space, the inconsistency of edibles onset times. So you eat an edible and you don't know whether it's going to hit you in 30 minutes or in 2 hours. I think has been one of the biggest challenges to adoption and mainstreaming of edibles. And now that the market is orienting so quickly toward much more consistent onset times across very consistent product formulations, I think that opens up the category to a whole new range of use cases that rival flower, if you're not having to wait for an indeterminate but very long amount of time to feel the effects.
I think there's another piece to the puzzle, which for me is really about category management as it relates to the retailers. So, in today's pandemic, conversations that we've had with CPG are around filling the shelves of existing products, right? Like, filling the pipeline because of what happened during the pandemic. And if you look at it from a cannabis retail perspective, if 70% of their consumers coming into their stores are purchasing dried flower or vapes, as an example, making sure we balance that education with allowing them to run their business and not trying to force a 5% category on them when they're trying to pay their bills through click and collect and that as well. But category management to me is another huge opportunity that Valens has the ability to bring to retailers, to regional and national accounts, to help them understand, John, you put the slide up there, I think it was in Washington or Colorado, of all the different SKUs within all the different categories. And I think if you take a CPG approach to what Walmart does and Loblaws does, is they look at a category, they analyze the sales per point of distribution, they pick a captain to manage that business, i.e. a Nestle's or a Kraft, and allow them to come back with, you tell us what this shelf set should look like. You tell us what these products. So Valens is in a great position to partner with regional and national accounts to become their category captain, because we manufacture and are close to every single category that is available in Canada today. And I think in conversations I've had with retailers, they would welcome that with open arms, because they have to run their shop per se, but giving them a perspective of what percentage of each of the products, what the price point needs to look like, what innovation is coming out, and kind of helping them manage their business on a day-to-day as they continue to run their retail operations is something you're going to start to see, in my opinion, throughout 2021 into next year as well. It's an evolution.
So I'll just add, and I realize I'm flogging this point, but I think it's a really critical point, which is to your point about category management, Steve. It's really important to appreciate the fact that consumers don't know these products. they're being exposed to them for the first time. So even though cannabis consumers have, broadly speaking, been very well oriented to flower, and when they walked into dispensaries, they were able to ask the right questions about flower, they had some orientation. With these new categories of products, there's a lot of education that needs to happen. And so for brands that are launching in this space, critical to have a good partner, a good distributor who can get you situated in retail shelves. But to Steve's earlier point, also really important that you're creating a bit of a market pull by engaging the consumers directly, generating interest and buzz around your product, so that consumers are walking into the dispensary asking for your brand, thereby stimulating the retailers to carry these. Because to Steve's point, if the market still is flower dominated, that's where the focus is going to be, but you're much more likely to get retail space, retail shelf space, if the consumers are walking in and looking for your brand.
And if you can help them understand that you can take their annual or monthly sales from here to here by continuing to focus on their core, which clearly is dried flower, but helping them navigate what's coming down the pipeline with respect to all the different technologies and products that Valens has the ability to produce, and with what's coming in the marketplace today. Those are going to be the licensed producers, in my opinion, where you're going to get preferred customer management status, like Nestle has with Walmart and Kraft has with Loblaws and some of those categories. So it's coming, but I think it's a bit early today, because with what's happening within the Canadian marketplace around some of the consolidation and the mergers, it's a matter of if, not when.
So we have on screen the kind of 6-step process to getting a product to market. And some of this, I think is pretty self-explanatory if you kind of read the items here. But Steve, maybe I'll ask you, since you're the one, since Valens is working with so many kind of leading companies, what are some of the big questions you get from the CPGs that are looking at this space, or things that they should understand as they're engaging Valens to help quickly scale or test a product for the market?
Yeah, for sure. I think the first step is you need to be a licensed producer to actually, make a cannabis product, which has been some of the conversations. So you can't make it in your own production facility. We'll take your ingredients and your capabilities and your R&D and your manufacturing team with us, but that's probably the first one. And I think depending upon the province, and each province is going through different stages with respect to when they accept new product introductions. But taking that aside, the process for us from getting a product to market can take, anywhere from 90 to 120 days. I think the biggest component to that is more the R&D, the research and development, the formulation of the product. That is where, primarily 50% of the time is being spent on, because it's so important that when you launch something for the first time, that you're, spending 7 hours to chop a tree down, you'll spend 6, sharpening your axe, and an hour cutting the tree down. So at Valens, we take a very methodical approach. I think that the benefit that we have is we're high trust, high credibility, tons of experience and extraction, as Quinn talked about. So the R&D component of it, to me, is the biggest part. And then the other pieces to the puzzle around procurement, pricing, CTLSs within the, getting those set up, which takes 60 days as well. And then the ability to actually get that product to market through a provincial wholesaler and to a retailer. So no different than what a CPG would be known for is how do you get your products listed at Loblaws? Well, you obviously have to present that to the head office, to the category buyer. But at Valens, our approach is we don't want to bring things to the provincial wholesalers unless we understand there's a consumer need for that product. There's enough products in the market today that'll fill what I call the current gap of existing categories. But where we come in, and what Quinn talked about, is the uniqueness of us making products together with CPG customers, doing R&D in that partnership. We'll absolutely make sure that when a consumer does buy that product, it is grounded not in a trusted licensed producer, but it's got the certification of a consumer packaged goods company, whether it's using their name brand or using a ghost brand. So those are the conversations that we've been having over the last, 3 to 6 months. So it's a matter of when, not if. There's many, surprising to me, it's many, CPG companies are continuing to look at this space. And I think COVID put a lot of that on pause because of, as I mentioned before, focusing on their core business and making sure they filled their shelves. And also the size of the opportunity, like how big is the opportunity? If you don't want to launch a product that's THC, that's CBD, the size of the prize may not be as big enough today, but rest assured when regulations start changing and the consumer and marketing, it could take, when those regulations change, 6 months to 9 months, where you may not have the ability to partner with an LP because everyone's too busy. So those would be, some of the discussions and conversations that I've had recently, which is exciting because for us, we joined the FHCP in Canada, which is the Food, Health, Consumer Packaged Goods. And the reason we joined the FHCP is we wanted to educate Canadian CPG companies around consumer insight, research and development, trends in the marketplace. You have the ability to choose any licensed producer that you want to work with. But at the end of the day, the question becomes is why Valens? Why does Valens, the partner for us? And I think we've touched on a lot of that through this presentation. And I think the nimbleness of us to be able to put 2,000 chocolate bars in Ontario in 120 days to prove the concept. Because let's be honest, it may not work everywhere, but why wouldn't you want to prove your hypothesis? And then to Quinn's point, maybe it was the wrong cannabinoid. Maybe we didn't get enough consumer insight. So I think sometimes if you wait too long, the consumer is going to change their perception and mind. And we're in a new industry, right? We're in a brand new industry. And it's clear that over the last 2 years, not everyone's figured it out, right? But in anything in life, it's the partnerships that you build with people personally and professionally over time that will be able to get to you where you want to.
So it's a really important point there in that this is a really critical moment to innovate because the opportunity costs for innovating now are so low and they're only going to get higher over time. So do the proving now before the consumer's preferences are really well defined, before the costs to scale become much higher as the market expands. Really, really elegant time to build. So Quinn, to that point, what are some of the just big differences that you should think about depending on the type of product that you're trying to formulate? So if somebody's looking at, say, a cosmetic cream, a balm or salve, as opposed to a beverage, what are some of the kind of big differences either in the engineering of this or in terms of timelines that you should be aware of as you're exploring your product options?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many different ways to look at the product development, but I always like looking at the end product and kind of working backwards as there's a lot of product specifications that need to be found out early on so we can best choose the methods of extraction, the cannabis and hemp biomass to be used. So there's a lot of early on indication steps that really can make the product great or fall flat on its face. So when we look at product development, we ask always the questions of what is your active resin? Do you want a cannabis forward flavor product, or do you want a non-taste product, or a kind of a medical based product, or those are the kind of the first on questions we look at. And that's really where we look at, okay, we're using hemp or a cannabis based product. And then we look at what extraction method to be used and really give guidance along that whole supply chain of product procurement of what biomass and THC to use to have a quality starting material, what extraction method to derive the best value if it's cost effective, a full spectrum oil. And having those key steps early on is really key for understanding of how to build this product out. And then you look at a few of the methods of how to develop the product, where to inject it or infuse it into your product. But also the big ones are on stability through the production processes, not to degrade the cannabinoids, not to wreck them over the processing. And then once you have all the product development from biomass selection, extraction, you infused it properly, now you need to make it sure it's shelf stable. And from a vaporizer, we understand it. We can make it very quickly. We could have it out the door under 60 days. But getting into these more complex ingredients, we have a product like a keto manufacturing bite a protein bite, there's a lot more complex ingredients that go within that. So looking at product stability and life cycle are more important. If you're following a 1 month or 6 month or 12 month stability guidelines, a lot of CPG individuals are looking for that data of 6 to 12 months of product stability and shelf life stability. And cannabinoids do weird things at oxygen or temperature and time really can impact that end product. So packaging really comes into play there at the end. Now we have all the product developed, it's stable. Now you select that packaging that really can, in beverages, can cause problems that it's scalping, or if it's in aluminum tins, we've seen products, cannabinoids getting lost to aluminum tins. And also the oxygen transmission rate can play a big factor. So all these key nuances are custom and known in the CPG and pharma industries, but cannabinoids act differently. So having a proper R&D cycle, proper development of stability studies is really key to have these long-lasting products.
So we only have about 5 minutes left, and I want to do a couple of things. Want to get through a couple of more audience questions and then get your take on the future. So maybe very, very quickly, Steve, 2 questions for you. One from Tony Brookenbauer. Are source-based products available now? If so, what format?
The answer is yes, they are available. We have 2 in the market today.
And what product forms are those in?
Beverages, you mean? The beverages we have, Base Camp. So Valens has a couple brands right now that they've launched in beverages that we have today in the marketplace.
Okay.
Just to add to there, Steve, we have a really cool, it's a functional drop, like an emulsion drop that you could be added into different cooking scenarios or making your kind of different baking or confectionery or edible manufacturing at home. So you really can change using that stable, taste-free, smell-free product. The Verse THC and CBD drops really allow the consumer to dictate their potency and consumption methods through all different verticals by just simply adding it in. So a few cool products using these innovative source technology.
And then second, from Joel Duffy, do you envision CBD products being allowed for sale in the Canadian market with the same level of liberalization that we have in the US, where you can basically find CBD everywhere? Do you think the Canadian market is likely going to go the same direction?
My personal view is yes, I do. I think it will. I think with the credibility that Canadian licensed producers have built over time, and I think with the ongoing research around CBD in products today, we can demonstrate that that those type of products should be sold over the counter, like you find other types of products to solve, you know, health and wellness and personal issues as you go into Shoppers Drug Mart. So I think it's just a matter of time. I mean, obviously the biggest challenge is it's a cannabis plant, and every plant is different, and everyone's endocannabinoid system is different as far as how they interact with that product. But my personal belief is absolutely that we should be in and will be seeing CBD-based products on shelves in Canada at some point in the near future.
So watch this space. You've heard it from the expert himself.
Yeah. I think because I only think it makes sense from a consumer perspective. That's why it's and from a business perspective, right? And you know.
I don't think we have time to get into this slide, but suffice it to say that Valens can work with you based on everything that Quinn and Steve have said, that they can work with you in any way that you need a partner to support you in this. A lot of flexibility to build and structure the relationship in a way that makes the most sense.
Just to touch on this one, John, quickly, we've had conversations across all of those scenarios as well, right? So we created these based upon conversations that we're having today. Before it was a white sheet, but through conversations, we are flexible to create any sort of partnership and arrangement and we'll continue to do that, which makes sense for both companies.
Great. So it's going to have to be a bit of a lightning round given where we are on the clock, but I'd like to quickly touch on what to look out for. We've talked a bit about the CPG in the ingress of big CPGs, big alcohols, tobaccos, pharmas into the space. But maybe Steve, first to you, then to you, Quinn. What are some of the big trends you're going to be watching for as we look out at 2021 and beyond?
Yeah, I think for me, the big trends is the current conversations we're having with CPG companies and their excitement around trying to figure out exactly what products, how I do it, when. That to me is the most exciting point, and mostly CBD related within Canada, which I think is great. So to me, it's there's many conversations and opportunities that we have to bring, you know, this great plant into a product that deliver a great experience to consumers to help them both from a personal wellness and health and wellness and a personal perspective. So that to me is the exciting part in the future.
Quinn, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think it is a lot of the health and wellness segment and functional categories that's easy to understand, where products make your daily life consumption, your daily life better, and not too hard to understand why. So being able to have a daily ritual chew, a low calorie intake, a clean label aspect, where you really can look at a brand or one of our brands that we envision as looking at it like as a multivitamin from a name hold brand, where you're looking at that CBD or the minor cannabinoids added into it, but really getting into the routine of having loading up your endocannabinoid system with CBD daily, so you can really reap the benefits over time. I really can see that as people looking at an organic category or functional label claims and having that clean label, but easy to understand products that increase value to the day-to-day consumption. A lot of cool stuff coming out, I think, on recovery, understanding how cannabinoids react with inflammation and pain management, and being able to have those at a cost-effective rate so you can have high consumption and daily consumption products.
On a personal note, very excited to see what's happening in the cannabis and fitness space. Folks didn't realize there's a lot of opportunity for innovation, but that's a thing. I think one of the trends related to, ironically or interestingly, related to the infused product category, but it's actually kind of a more social and retail focused theme, is just the scale of change that is happening in the way cannabis is sold and the way cannabis is consumed in public spaces. One of the spaces we had an opportunity to visit during my tour in California was Papa and Barkley's new restaurant, dispensary, spa, and social lounge, smoking lounge in Northern California. And one, just in terms of the elegance of the space, it's a really nicely done space. It's really inviting. It really reflects the ethos of Northern California, of Humboldt County. And so it feels very appropriate in place. But two, the idea of having a space where you can have, you know, a smoking lounge that's comfortable, that's very adult, that's very communal, a spa that you can go to the dispensary, buy products, and have those products applied to you by professional hygienists and massage therapists. This is a really kind of extraordinary shift from where cannabis has been in the closet for the past century. And as we come out of the pandemic, the fact that consumers are going to be coming out a year of lockdown into spaces like this, which did not exist a year ago, I think is going to play a phenomenal role in the conversations we have about cannabis and the way folks begin to integrate cannabis into their lives post-pandemic. And one byproduct here, I think, is the fact that we're going to see a lot of cannabis-infused beverages specifically at barbecues and happy hours and evening parties this summer. You know, this I think is going to be the year of the awakening of social cannabis, and the value-added category I think is uniquely well positioned to capitalize on this timely opportunity. So, a lot to come. Very exciting season, and we're very excited to see all that will come. So with that, we've discussed a lot. We've covered a lot of ground. For those who may be interested in some of the consumer insights that we have recently released, please get your complimentary copy of the report that we produced at newfrontierdata.com/cannabis-consumer-evolution. It's a really insightful perspective on the cannabis consumer, and you can learn a lot about how consumers are making this transition from conventional products to value-added products. And finally, an extraordinary word of thanks to our two just phenomenal panelists. Steve Johnston, management consultant with Valens, Quinn Shiskin, who his title is Director of Product Innovation. I like to think Product Innovator Extraordinaire. You know, thank you both so much for just the depth of insight, the perspective, and what I thought was a really rich and collaborative conversation around what we think is one of the most exciting categories in this entire industry. the infused and value-added products. So first, maybe to you, Quinn, any closing thoughts for our attendees as we wrap up?
Yeah, thanks for everyone joining in today. As joining these education seminars is really going to shape the sector. Understanding how CPG manufacturing integrates into cannabis is our true passion here at Valens, and have a lot of wealth of knowledge from understanding from the end-to-end manufacturing, from selecting why a good strain or a good plant makes sense to go through the whole life cycle of product development to make a sound and wanted product for the consumers. So love these educations, John. So thanks for everything you do, and really look forward to further on educating and supporting the CPG and cannabis industry.
It's been our pleasure, Quinn. Thank you for doing this. Steve, a closing thought for our attendees.
Yeah, I think it was great to be able to have Quinn on the call. It's clearly, you see he's got an unbelievable amount of experience and passion and knowledge for the industry, and I think that's one of the big pluses at the Valens company, as we talked about, right? We have a mantra, it's personal and it's grounded in trust, respect, and experience. And I think Quinn clearly demonstrated that through a part of the discussion. So I hope people, come away with more education, more knowledge. That's what we're trying to do with those CPG companies that are looking to entertain and put their foot in the water. And we'd be more than willing to have follow-up conversations, both Quinn and myself together or separately. If we didn't get through all the questions, John, we'd love to answer them, even through email or follow-up conversations. So we're committed to doing that. But again, just thanks for those that took the time. I know we went a little bit longer. We have a tendency to talk quite a bit, or at least I do, but really appreciate you moderating this session. And we hope people felt there was value in the 90 minutes.
It's been our pleasure, Steve. Thank you very much for this partnership. I was really delighted to have this. And if there was ever a conversation that warranted running a little bit long, I think this was this. To our attendees, I hope one of the big takeaways from this session is the perspective on the value of choosing your partner wisely. Given the speed at which this marketplace is evolving and given the scale of opportunity ahead, picking the right partner, I think, puts you on the right stream to really capitalize on the phenomenal growth we're seeing in this space. And so do your diligence. And I hope Steve and Quinn have underscored or illustrated well to you why people who know their stuff can really build successful ventures in this marketplace. So Steve, Quinn, and the rest of the Valens team, thank you for the phenomenal kind of partnership in putting together this conversation. To our attendees, thank you for being here and for the amazing questions we've had. We wish you continued success in this dynamic market. We thank you for leveraging the resources that New Frontier provides. And we ask you, until the next time we see you, to take care of yourselves and take care of each other. My name is John Kagia. I'm the Chief Knowledge Officer with New Frontier, and it has been a delight to have this conversation. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Quinn. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you.